a lot getting to sit in on the keynote stuff. It's been great. This is just an awesome experience. But going through university in a day, like on a Saturday, man, that would be awesome. It'd be so much cheaper, so much less time. Instead of 4 years, you can just do it in a day and be done. Have so many degrees by now. But right now, we're going to focus. We're going to focus in on who the I Am is, and of course, a relationship with a man named Jacob. So the I Am, we've kind of been able to touch on who the I Am is. Really interesting being, right? It's not just He's God. It's not just I am who I am, which is a pretty incredible statement in and of itself. But He gives so much detail into God's nature, like His own nature. He talks about how good He is, how patient, how loving, how kind, right? And that's all a wonderful image of who our God is. But also He does say that He is a God of justice, a God of wrath. Our God is a beautiful and wonderful, terrifying being. He doesn't just stop at the fact that He's all-knowing, all-loving, everything, right? He's this perfect being, but He's scary. So I want to talk about this. Let me ask you, why would you be scared of God? Anybody? Why would you be scared of God? Or fear Him? Let's put it that way. Why would you fear God? He's powerful. Would you want to stand before Him right now? Probably not. Not in your state, because you'd die. Pretty simple. Why else would you want to fear God? We'll pose a hypothetical, not you specifically, but why would anybody want to fear God? Right. There's justice. Right? So if you're not on the right side of things, you're not doing the things that God asks you to do, you're not being obedient, that's a pretty scary thing, right? Falling into the hands of a wrathful God because you have not been doing the things that God wants you to do, that is a terrifying reality. The good thing is, if we keep His commandments, we fear Him and do what He's asked us to do, we have nothing to be scared of. Because God, so long as we're doing what He's asked us to do, is going to give us grace and mercy. But of course, God doesn't just hate all of those that aren't doing His will. He doesn't hate us if we fall short of His glory. He always loves us and will always love us. Right? He always will care about us and our eternal beings, our spirits. He cares for us. But the thing is, if we're not doing His will, why would He protect us? He's going to give justice to those who deserve it. God is who He is, and He also does what He says. If He promises that He's going to destroy you if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, He will. But because He loves us, we don't have to be scared of that, because we're going to do everything in our power to continue with Him, right? We're going to love Him and keep His commandments, right? We're going to do what He wants us to do. Now, the reason that I paint this image of a God to be feared, not because, we're not doing what not because we just want to look at God as someone who's scary, but because we want to look at God with fear and respect, right? And so we want to make sure that we're never on the side of which God needs to deal wrath with us. We don't want to be on that side. So we're going to talk about kind of a relationship here with Jacob and the way that they wrestled. This is really interesting in Genesis chapter 32, and this is in the middle of Jacob's life. And so it's just going to kind of tell us a story about who Jacob is. He's pinned up against God. He wrestles God. Now, when I was in high school, I actually got to wrestle, and I found out that apparently it's not as big of a deal to wrestle in Texas than it is in Colorado. But in Colorado, every high school has wrestling. You know, you guys have football, apparently we have wrestling. And so I got to wrestle, and every time in practice, they would always pin me up with the biggest guys, and they were the scariest guys. And I was this short little kid. I was kind of scrawny, you know, and I'd be looking up at the guy, and he'd just like pick me up and throw me down on the ground. And of course, they weren't very nice about it either. You know, in wrestling, these are the hardcore macho dudes, right? And so they're going to do everything they can to beat you up, right? And so every time that I would get into these situations, you know, they'd put me in difficult positions to where like it would hurt, and you know, my shoulder would start to get sore, things like that. It just was painful, and it wasn't very fun. Wrestling is not exactly the best sport to be a part of. But Jacob wrestled with God, and it's easy to understand Jacob and where he stands when we look at his life and understand him. So before we look at this wrestling match with God, we're going to look at Jacob and his life. So let's go ahead and get some background on who Jacob is. Who is Jacob? The son of Isaac. Who's Isaac's father? Abraham. So this is Abraham's grandson. All right. So Isaac, his wife, who? Rebekah. Isaac and Rebekah give birth to twins. Who was the first twin? Esau. What kind of man was he? Hairy, big. What's that? Man of the field. Okay. What's that? Skillful hunter. There we go. So Esau, right? Who favored Esau? Isaac. Isaac liked Esau because he was a skillful hunter, right? Now Jacob. Jacob was the second born twin. Anybody know what was significant about his birth? What? He was holding Esau's heel. That's pretty impressive for Rebekah. That's tough. It's scary. But first off, he's holding on to this heel. But we're going to look at something right before that. Before they were born, there's something in Genesis chapter 25 that I want you to see. Genesis chapter 25, we're going to look at verse 22. And this is talking about Jacob and Esau, specifically in Rebekah's womb. But the children struggled together within her. They literally were wrestling before they were even born. So apparently twins can fight before they're born, right? And so they were wrestling before they were born. It was almost as if when Esau was born, Jacob was like, come back in here. I'm gonna pull you back in. We're going to fight. No, he hung on to that heel. And he was rightly named Jacob because that's the one who hangs onto the heel, the supplanter, the usurper, right? And so already, before they were even born, he has this theme of wrestling with people, right? Then we have, going into their lives, we see kind of the interaction between Esau and Jacob. What kind of relationship did they have? Not a good one. What's the first instance, and I'll just mention this, it was over a bowl of soup. What happened? Go ahead. Right, Jacob took the birthright from Esau over a bowl of soup. A bowl of lentil stew, that red stuff, right? That's what Esau says. Give me some of that red stuff. He gave up his birthright. And of course, when it's written, God says he despised his birthright. So it wasn't just, Jacob's fault. Esau was being a little silly there. For stew, he's given up his birthright. Doesn't really make sense. But then there's another instance where Jacob is kind of at odds with his family. Where is that? Or what do we see? An instance where Jacob is at odds with his family. Something about stealing. Nobody? He stole the inheritance, right? So basically, Esau was born first, right? And so he was supposed to receive all of what his father had. And so basically what had happened was Isaac was telling Esau, go out into the field, kill an animal, bring it back, cook it, and bring it to me, and I will bless you. That's what he said. Rebekah overheard this, and remember, Rebekah loves Jacob more than Esau. And so Rebekah overhears this, and she goes to Jacob and says, go get 2 baby goats. We're going to slaughter them, we're going to cook them up, and we're going to give them to Isaac. But Jacob didn't do any of that. It was actually Rebekah doing all of this work. She gets Jacob brings the 2 goats. She kills them. She cooks them. She does all of this work. And then she goes and steals Esau's clothes and puts them on Jacob. And then she takes the skin from that goat and puts it on his arms and his neck to make sure that he feels hairy like Esau. It's weird. It's deceiving, right? And then what happens? Jacob goes with the food that his mother has prepared and gives it to Isaac and says, I am your son Esau. Bless me. And Isaac's a little skeptical. You sound like my son Jacob. But remember, Isaac is blind at this point. He's getting towards the end of his life. He doesn't really have the ability to see. So when he feels like Esau and he smells like Esau and he's cooked a meal like Esau, obviously he's just like, okay, I'll bless you. And he gives him the blessing that Esau is supposed to receive. Well, then Esau comes in and says, hey, Father, I've brought you the meal that you've asked for. And Isaac's like, you just gave this to me. Is this a joke? And Esau is burning mad because he realized what had been done. Jacob stole this blessing from Esau. And Esau said what? What is he going to do? What was his plan? I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill Jacob. My brother deserves to die, right? And that's what he has in his mind. And so Rebekah overhears this, and she's trying to protect Jacob. I understand, trying to protect him, and says, go to my brother Laban. And there he meets Rachel and wants to marry her. And so he works out this agreement with Laban that he'll work for 7 years in return for his daughter Rachel. After 7 years, who does he receive? Leah. What's up with this? Constantly, just this back and forth, treachery, right? He works another 7 years, and he finally receives the girl of his dreams, the one that he's been wanting this entire time, right? But he's been married to Leah. Now, all of this time, he serves a little bit longer with Laban, and then God tells him to go home. During that time, he had been blessed with several children, up to 11 at this point, and he had one specific son that we read about all throughout Genesis, specifically Joseph. That was his favorite son because it was from his favorite wife. But after several years with Laban, God tells him that Laban's attitude has changed, and so he says, get out of there. Go home. Why would Jacob be scared to go home? Esau's going to kill him. This has been, 20 years in the making. He hasn't seen his brother for 20 years. What if I told you that there's an ex-convict in this room? He murdered several people, and he's got a knife. He's hidden in this room. You want to go ahead and go in there? I'll be with you. Let's go. Come on. Are you serious? You really want to go? He's got a knife. That's pretty scary, right? Would you want to go in there? Like, yeah, you were willing to because I asked you to. Thank you for that. That's good. That's awesome. Shows that you're obedient, right? But that's terrifying. I'm not going to go in there. Not if I know there's a serial killer in there that's wanting to kill me. Why would I do that? Well, God tells Jacob, go home, but I'll be with you. And it's a lot different because God can actually protect him. I couldn't protect you in there, right? So, now, Jacob's on his way home, and obviously he's fearful of Esau and everything that's to come when he gets home. So he separates his family into 2 different camps. He separates them up, and he figures that if one family dies or one camp dies, then I still have this family, and I'll be okay. And he sends his servants ahead of him, and he finds out that Esau's on his way with 400 men. Uh-oh. Not only is Esau going to kill him, but so are 400 other people. That's pretty scary. And so obviously he's fearful of this and what's to come. And so he does, after he separates his group, what does he do? We see this in chapter 32, verses 9 through 12. One thing that's very specific that he does. We'll go ahead and read that, and we'll see what is on Jacob's mind and on Jacob's heart. He says, verse 9 of chapter 32, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who did say to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you. I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and all the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me, the mothers with the children. For you did say, I will surely prosper you, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. He prayed to God because he was scared. He prayed to God and said, hey, look, you promised me you would protect me. You said that you were going to take care of me, so do it. Deliver me from the hand of Esau. Because in reality, if God didn't have anything to do with it, if I were Esau, I'd probably still kill him. But God had his hand in it the entire time. One thing that I want to look at before he prays, before he even goes to Padan Aram to see Laban, he goes, he's on his way to see Laban, but he goes and he has a dream. He lays his head down on a rock, and he has this dream of a ladder where angels are going up and down. But he makes a vow after this dream. And he says, Lord, if you get me to where I need to be, and you get me back home, and the entire time you provide for me, you will be my God. So when he's praying to God right now, he hasn't made it home. So we have to recognize, we see the first thing that he says, O God of my father Abraham, O God of my father Isaac. He doesn't say, my God. This isn't his God yet. He has not made God his God. He respects him, and he knows that he's a part of his life and that he is working with him and working in his life, right? But he has not made the commitment to him to be his God completely. There's no half on, half off deal here. You are either fully invested in God or not. There's no in between. But when he prays, God still promises that he's going to deliver him. Now, after this prayer, another night passes. He sends his family before him. He sends them across the creek, and they all go on without him. His idea, again, Esau sees them first. Maybe when he sees me, he won't be as mad. Right? And so he's trying to protect himself. So while he's alone on this other side of the creek, he comes across a man. And that's where we pick up in Genesis chapter 32, verse 24. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh, so the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. And then Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. Now the sun rose up just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. This is quite a wrestling match. It's a lot better than pay-per-view, UFC, and all that good stuff. A lot better, because we're going to actually get something out of it. When he's wrestling this man, he wrestles all night. From dusk till dawn. That's a long time to be wrestling. And then when you notice, he's disabled now. He's got a hip out of socket. We're going to look at 4 applications. 4 applications on this wrestling match here. How can we apply this to our lives? 4 different applications. The first application that we're going to look at was Jacob was humbled. So we, ourselves, the application, we need to be humbled as well. First off, Jacob is off on his own, so lonely, right? And when he's striving with God, God strikes him right in the thigh, and it dislocates his hip. Well, okay. I just had this conversation with someone that said their joints disconnect or pop out all the time. And she said that her shoulder had popped out during the lesson. That's nasty. And she said, well, it just happens all the time, right? And I was like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't just happen all the time. There's another kid that could pop his elbow out of place by pushing it up, like all the way through. I was like, that is disgusting. How do you do that? I don't want to do it, but how do you do that, right? And then people can do that with their fingers, their shoulders. It's nasty. No offense, right? But try dislocating. Don't try, please. But if you're trying to dislocate your hip, you got a problem. But have you ever seen someone dislocate something while they're running or something? I mean, that is a sight to see because, I mean, it will just stop them right in their tracks. As soon as it happens, it's like they're done. They're not going to continue. It's just not happening, especially on something like your hip. Yet, when he was wrestling, he still wrestled. Jacob continued all the way through the rest of the night, but he was humbled at that point because a physically strong man wrestling against this guy, now he doesn't even have the power of his leg. One of his legs is dislocated. I mean, from your hip down, like, yeah, you could probably move your knee, but it's probably going to hurt. It's really going to be painful to do anything. And so he's still here trying to fight with this guy. That's humbling, isn't it? But let me ask you this. If you're doing the work of the devil, if you're sinning and continuing in sin, is Satan going to strike your side and say, hey, don't be doing that? Probably not, right? Satan's going to do everything he can to help you. He's going to keep going on this path of sin. He's going to say, hey, man, look, what you're doing is right. Just keep going. It's okay. Not God. God's not like that. If you're wrong, God's going to show you. The book, the good book, the Bible, right? When you read it, sometimes you feel guilty because maybe you've done something that's listed. Or maybe when he's describing people that aren't Christians, it describes you. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever been reading across in some of Paul's writings where it's just like, man, this is describing exactly who I am. And you just feel this sorrow because you realize how guilty you are. Or maybe you hear a sermon on Sunday morning and it just makes you feel terrible about yourself. Not because, someone's up there sending slander against you, but because it hits you right in the heart because you're guilty of those things. God is not afraid to strike us if we're doing something wrong. God's not going to let us continue down this path without letting us know, hey man, what you're doing is wrong. Without God, you're wrong. Satan will let you keep going and let you think that you're doing the right thing, right? He's going to keep helping you commit these sins. He's going to make it easier for you to commit these sins. He's going to help you be better at trying to hide it or trying to commit this sin, right? But God's not. God's going to stop you in your tracks. He's going to strike you in the hip. He's going to dislocate it. He's going to make you realize that what you're doing is wrong. God's going to humble us. And it's okay to admit that you're wrong. I shared a illustration earlier. There was a man that came and he preached at a seminar similar to this. And he misspoke while preaching. And he said something wrong. And it wasn't a big deal, but it didn't change doctrine, but he misspoke and he wanted to make sure that he wasn't preaching falsely. He wanted to make sure that he was right. And so he found the emails of everybody in the auditorium, at least all that he could find. He found the emails of everybody that he could, and he sent out this mass email that said, I misspoke in my sermon. I gave you the wrong information, and I'm terribly sorry that I did that. And he sent out the correct information. How hard would it be for you to admit that you're wrong like that? To tell everybody that you're wrong? Could you imagine receiving an email from me? You know how embarrassing that would be for me if I said, hey, you know how you guys were at Discipleship University, 2 weeks ago? I realized, I was watching the video of me preaching, I realized that I said something wrong. I'm sorry. This is what I actually should have said. How would you feel about that? Would you feel like, man, this guy's stupid. Why did I even listen to him? Probably not. You'd probably think, wow, this guy's, wanting to do what's right. Right? But the thing is, a lot of times people are going to take it as if you're weak. When you admit that you're wrong, you're not weak. You're humble. And you realize that you are not adequate. You are not enough without God. And so you need to realize that when you're struggling with sin, it's okay to admit it. And also, when someone comes to you with a sin and says, hey, I need your help, I'm struggling with this sin, you have an obligation to not treat them poorly. You have an obligation to allow them to open up to you and to love them despite their sin, so long as they're willing to change it, right? And so this is an opportunity for us to realize that we need to be humbled. We need to allow ourselves, when we find out that we're doing something wrong, to fix it. Not just sit there and wallow in it. Because if you sit there and wallow in your struggles, where are you going to go? Absolutely nowhere. If you think that your struggles are so bad right now, you're not going to get anywhere. And it's just going to be a terrible time for yourself now. We need to humble ourselves, and we need to allow God to work in our lives to help us and to correct us, right? Jacob was corrected. He was disabled and humbled. Now, let's look at application number 2. Application number 2. Jacob clung to I am, right? Jacob clung to God. He did not let go when he said, I want a blessing. And he did not let go. He didn't let go until he received that blessing. The Lord is with us, and He's with us always, so long as we're with Him. We need to cling to God the way that Jacob clung to Him while waiting for a blessing. Now, I've got to ask, who's got their license? Got their license? Okay, do you have it on you? Yeah? Pull it out. I'm going to show you something. Show you something interesting. I don't need your license. I don't need it. But pull it out. They tell you this. They should tell you this at the DMV at the very least. But at the bottom of your license, it says Texas Roadside Assistance, 1-800-525-5555. That's the number that you call if you have a flat tire on the side of the road. Pretty neat, right? So if you don't have your license, now you know when you do get your license, you have a number to call if something happens. Is that where I'm going with it? No. Do you call God like He's the Texas Roadside Assistance number? When you're struggling, do you call on Him and say, God, I need you? And then once He's there for you and everything gets better, you just leave? Because with Texas Roadside Assistance, when they come, they help you fix your tire, and then they get you on your way. They just try to get you out. You know, they don't want you on the side of the road. They just want you going and with the traffic, getting the pictures of your license plate on the toll roads. That's what they want, right? But with God, it's not just about fixing that flat tire. It's about the follow-through afterwards. You know, you get that tire fixed, but then also you continue to lean on Him. After you get your tire fixed, you're not going to call that number and say, hey, Texas Roadside Assistance, thank you so very much. I'm having such a good day. And then the next day you call them again. You're like, hey, guys, thank you so very much. You guys are just awesome. I'm having a really good day today. It's been great since my tire, got fixed. And then you call them again the next day. That's annoying and just silly, right? You're not going to call them over and over again just to tell them how good of a day you're having. But God, that's not annoying. That's kind of expected. It's not just kind of expected, but it is expected. It's expected that we lean on Him, not just when our life is going, wrong, Not just when things are hard, but when things are good, we should praise God. When we are joyful, we should share it with God. When we are lonely, we should lean on God, because we shouldn't be lonely because we have God, right? He's not just some number that you call when you're in trouble. You need to cling to Him in every moment, not just the bad. Jacob clung to Him. And after this moment, he clung to God for the rest of his life. And of course, he failed several times, but the focus was he clung to Him. He held on as tight as he could. And like I said, I mentioned that I was in wrestling. When I was in wrestling in high school, our coach had what was called a loser board. And it wasn't a quitter board, it was the loser board. And it was posted in the gym where everybody could see it. So everybody in the high school knew who was on this loser board. So basically, if you showed up for tryouts on the wrestling team and you made the team, then you wrestled with them, right? And that was your entire life was wrestling. But if you quit, your name went up on the loser board. And everybody knew that you were a loser. And the coaches, they would make fun of you in the hallway. They'd call you a loser. And it was because your name was on the loser board. That was embarrassing. It was humiliating to kids. I mean, especially if maybe they just don't have time to be in wrestling or whatever the case might be. It's humiliating. But at the same time, it taught them, you stick with it until it's over. You stick with it. Now, God's not going to humiliate us by putting our name up on a loser board. He's not going to do that. But how humiliating is it when you fall away from God and you realize that you've been away from Him, right? And you try to come back. People look at you different. It's almost like it's humiliating. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. But we need to cling to Him so that way we don't ever feel like that loser, right? We don't want to feel that way. We should never be treated that way. But unfortunately, it's a reality. Cling to God through all moments, and we won't ever have those realities. Cling to God in every moment possible. Cling to God now, especially since you're young, right? This is the time to start. This is the time. Because then, your sin is light. You're not going to regret your 20s or your 30s. You're not going to regret much. Other than the fact that maybe you made some mistakes in high school or made some mistakes along the way, but you've been with God this whole time. And that's a great thing. You guys are blessed. Let's look at the third application. Jacob understood his preservation. He understood that he was preserved. We notice in verse 30, he says, Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. Like we spoke about earlier, God is a terrifying being. Not because He's some, mean person or mean being, but because He's terrifying. And every time that we strive with Him, we could get killed. Jacob, being face to face with God, there was no way that God was just too weak to beat Jacob. He said that he was struggling to prevail against Jacob. God was letting him win. There is no way that God was struggling. He let him think he was. God doesn't waver. God's not weak. He could have at any moment struck Jacob dead. And not just, striking him or hitting him, but He could have spoke the word die. One word would have been enough for him to just die. He could have thought, and he would have fallen. God is powerful, but yet He did not strike Jacob dead. He was there the whole night and did not kill him. He wanted to use him for good. And He allowed him to win this battle, this strife with God, right? The Lord is able to destroy us, He's able to leave us. Have we not given him every reason to? We saw the flood where only 8 people in the entire world were saved because the rest of the world was lost. How much of this world, right now, as it sits, how much of this world is lost? Doomed. It's a pretty scary thought. God can strike us dead, and like I said, we give him so many reasons to leave us, but yet he doesn't. When you fail, when you are wrestling with him, he doesn't just strike you dead because you messed up. God is a God of mercy. God gives you a love and a compassion that is unmatched. So when you're falling short, when you're messing up, he doesn't just leave you to die. Like we said before, he humbles and he lets you know when you're messing up. But you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to realize that God is as powerful as he is. You have to understand that God can destroy you. And if you're against him, he will destroy you. But so long as you continue on the path that you're supposed to, he's going to love you always. And he will never leave you. And he won't just strike you dead because he can. That's not the kind of God that we serve. Let's look at this last application. Application number 4. Jacob was transformed. No longer was Jacob Jacob. No longer was Jacob the guy who held on to the heel. No longer was Jacob the usurper or the manipulator. Jacob is now called Israel. He's got a new name. A new name. He is Israel. If you are the same person tomorrow that you are today, you're not doing enough. If you're not changing, if you're not trying to become better in some way, shape, or form, you're failing. He sat there and he wrestled with God until God was able to change him. It says that Jacob prevailed against God at this point, right? So it seems as if Jacob has won this battle, but in reality, it was God who won. Because God, not only did he wrestle and allow this guy to win, right? He did that, but he won a soul at that point. Jacob's spirit was broken. He was no longer this guy that thought he can do it on his own. He was a guy that was reliant upon God. He was a guy that leaned upon God because he knew that his God was going to be there. He wasn't going to lean upon himself anymore. He wasn't Jacob. He was Israel. Now, of course, when you change, right? When you are baptized, you don't receive a new name, although that'd be pretty fun. You don't receive a new name, but you do transform. You become new. It's like you're born again, right? And so every day you're transforming, trying to be better than you were before. Every day you're trying to become what God wants you to be. Now, the thing is, we become what we want to be, right? And the thing is, in the environment that we grow up in, some of us are probably in worse environments than others or better environments than others. None of that matters. Nobody starts off with a head start when it comes to God. Because just because maybe your family is rich or your family is poor, none of that matters. None of that matters. Because God loves you. If you're struggling right now, I know that when I was in high school, man, I struggled. I struggled so bad, especially with my family. There was so much going on with my family that it was easy to just fall right into it. And I see my siblings struggling with that. But it's very, very easy to just sit in your struggles and allow them to make you and shape you into the person that you are, but not in a good way. Right? If you allow your struggles, the things that you're struggling with, to make you who you are in a bad way, like if they create you instead of God, you're going to fail, man. You're not going to get anywhere. If your struggles are so big that you don't ever see God, like the idea of noise, there's just so much noise going on. There's so much around us that's distracting us from God. Our struggles don't make us. God does. Our struggles might help us persevere. It might teach us how to become better, right? And so we come out of our struggles. We don't wallow in them. If you're struggling with some sort of sin right now, this is your time to transform. Just because you think you're too far gone doesn't mean that you are. This is the time to transform. Especially now, you've already done some of the part. You've taken the step to come here. And you're about to go into 2 more classes and you're going to learn more about God. You're taking the step to become better. And that's enough right now because it's a start. One of the things that I struggle with is I try to take on way too much. I bite off way more than I can chew. And then I fail and I feel bad about myself and I just can't get anywhere. Let's take baby steps. Start small. Have small victories, and then in the end you'll have the big victory, right? Start small. Are we going to be humbled like Jacob? Are we going to realize that we need to be humble? That we are not as good as we might think we are. We need to find humility. Then on top of that, are you going to cling to God? Are you going to hang on to Him no matter what? No matter what storms your life brings, are you going to hang on to God? Or are you going to cling to those struggles and sink right with them? Are you going to realize your preservation? Are you going to realize that God is preserving you because He loves you? Even though you sin, God loves you. And He will preserve you because He cares for you. And then last, are you going to be transformed? Are you going to be better tomorrow, or better today, I guess, better today than you were yesterday? What are you going to remove from your life that can help you be better? What are you going to add to your life that can help you be better? I know it's a lot easier said than done. But God doesn't leave you on your own. Sometimes it feels like we're sinking. Yes, I know. Believe me, I know. But if we're not clinging, if we're not hanging on to Him, how will we know that He loves us? This is a perfect opportunity for you to learn more and more about Him. And I'm grateful that you guys are here. I want to go ahead and lead us in a prayer.